what was your beginning of your spirituality journey?
When I was born. So, of course, the spiritual journey starts when you're born, and it's a discovery whether you know it or not. So when I was about 19 or 20, I discovered yoga and meditation, became vegetarian, started doing massive quantities of yoga and changing my entire way of being. And within a few years, I was a completely different person. And that has stayed with me all these years.
That is Jean-Paul Setlak. I am Catherine Alonso. This is Change in You. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here. And I am really, really excited to share this conversation with you today. And to start off, I'm going to tell you the story of how I met Jean-Paul. So, background. This is going to sound like it's a story about me, but I'll get to the Jean-Paul of it all. So, I am from England. As you all know, English is my first and only language. And my husband, Ruben Alonso, grew up in Yuma, Arizona, and his parents both were born and raised in Mexico, and they don't speak English. And so when Ruben and I met and I was first meeting his parents, he would translate for us. Ruben would translate, and his dad speaks a little bit. His mom really doesn't speak any at all. And I just always, what I discovered really, really quickly is that personality lives in language. And that without knowing Spanish, I will never really, really know my in-laws. Because I realized that I didn't really know if they were funny. I didn't know if they were kind. I didn't know what the dynamic was with each other. I didn't know if they would make jokes or they would snap at each other. I didn't know what things they liked to talk about. And there was just this limitation of how well I was ever going to know them without learning Spanish. And so I decided to learn Spanish. And I really enjoyed French in high school. It's something I've really enjoyed. It's something I had wanted to do anyway, really. And I had a couple of false starts just using apps and trying on my own, and decided finally to invest in a Spanish teacher. And so I used a website online to find Spanish teachers in the area. And I found Jean-Paul. And Jean-Paul Setlak is French. He is originally from France. He speaks many languages. And we started working together, I think in January of 2018, I think. So it was quite a few years ago now. And when we first started working together, I knew one word of Spanish, which was frijoles. And now I would say I'm an intermediate learner. And I'm always learning. I still do lessons with Jean-Paul now. I did a Spanish language immersion in Puebla in Mexico last year, and intend to continue doing things like that. I now can hold a pretty decent conversation with my in-laws, and I can confirm that I know them. I know who they are. It turns out that they both have great senses of humor. My father-in-law is very funny. My mother-in-law is very kind. And it has just been such a pleasure to go on that journey with Jean-Paul. And at the same time, he hasn't only taught me Spanish, but he has taught me an incredible amount about spirituality and mindset. And in the very best way, I have gotten so much more than I bargained for, or so much more that I hoped for from our lessons together. I went in wanting to learn Spanish, and instead I have really learned an operating system for a happy life, which sounds like a really big exaggeration, but it isn't, not at all. And so when I was thinking about this first season of Change in You and who I wanted to interview, I knew that I wanted to have a conversation with Jean-Paul and the power of mindset in overcoming any challenge that you might have, and the power of spirituality on your own journey and your own mission to make an impact in the world. So without any further ado, my conversation with Jean-Paul Setlak. Jean-Paul Setlak, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I am so grateful to have you here, and thank you so much for being here. And this will be a funny and great experience because you and I have spent many, many, many hours together on Zoom talking about all kinds of things, but never recorded, never for other people to listen to. So it's going to be a new and different experience for us.
So I'm in your hands.
Exactly. I am in control this time. So to start off, Jean-Paul, I'd love to know about where you were born and what was your journey like to end up in America?
I was born in France, and when I was about 13 years old, so I was raised as a normal French boy, in the 50s. And when I was 13 years old, my father, who was a banker, moved our family to Beverly Hills, California.
Mm-hmm. And what was that change like for you?
A tremendous difference, of course. French culture, 50s, 60s French culture is very different from American culture. So it was incredibly, first it was very traumatic, then it was very exciting, then it was again traumatic.
And where did the traumatic part come from?
Cultural dissociation.
Yeah.
People thinking, operating in such a different way. Yeah. Values, very, very different. Little French boy, honor was everything, but not here. It's different words that they relate to.
Yeah, different things are important. Yeah, I had the same experience when I moved here, that there are different things that are important. And when you grow up in a particular place, you're not conscious of that. It just, things operate in a certain way and you get accustomed to that. And then you go somewhere else where things operate in a different way and it can be very discombobulating.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, the way that you and I have intersected is you, for many years, have been teaching me Spanish. And so what was your journey what was your journey to becoming somebody that teaches languages?
Well, my father came to France at the end of World War II. He was Polish, and he was a polyglot, spoke many languages, and had survived in Germany as a prisoner, as a forced laborer, by knowing many languages, learning German perfectly, so he passed that on to me. The importance of learning languages. So when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, we started learning some English, learning some German, learning some Spanish, and I would get a 1 franc piece if I could memorize a song in German or English and be able to translate it and recite it from memory. So I was taught that languages bring you wealth and success and happiness.
And has that been your experience?
Yes, partly. A lot of satisfaction from languages. But then, of course, at 13, I came over to this country. I was the best in my English class, but did not understand a word of what was being said to me or couldn't communicate. But very quickly, I picked up the language and became acculturated to America and learned about Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones and the whole American culture, Vietnam culture in those days. And, but in terms of languages, then of course I picked up Spanish. I had picked up Latin and some German and then Spanish, which was very easy. And I was in love with my Spanish teacher, in high school. So that stimulated me to learn more Spanish.
That helped.
Later on, and we might talk about that part of my journey, but I was very interested in yoga, meditation, India. So then I picked up medieval Punjabi and Punjabi, which was quite a different story. And then later down the line, learned Chinese because I was fascinated with Qigong, Tai Chi, and the whole Chinese spiritual culture. So it's been a continuous journey of picking up new languages.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like language for you is a part of accessing different worlds, different things that you're interested in, different things that fascinate you. Language is a part of accessing that. Is that right?
Right, because when you speak the language, you're able to communicate with the natives, so to speak, much more deeply. You're able to start to understand how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and you can get to the depth of the culture.
That's certainly been my experience. I wanted to learn Spanish so that I could really get to know my mother-in-law and my father-in-law who don't speak English, because I learned really quickly that a lot of personality lives in language.
Right.
And so you will never really truly know somebody's quirks and if they're funny and if what their dynamic is like with each other, my in-laws, unless I was able to share a language with them. And my journey of learning Spanish has been twofold. On one plane, it is getting more familiar with the language and its mechanics and how it works. But as I take each advancing step on that journey, it does open up this new level of knowing my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, two people who are very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. It's been just as richer, way, way richer than I ever could have imagined.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Because I love language, just pure language, whatever the language I'm speaking at the time. Learning a new one is like, the Impressionists or, the Baroque. Every language is a different culture, a different sense of how to operate. And so you're very much enriched by learning new languages. You can't think the same way in one language as you can in another. I've done a thing where if I'm upset in English, then I'll go to French or Spanish because the thoughts are different. The thought forms, the patterns are different. So there's a lot of good uses for it.
Right. And translation isn't perfect, and something that means something in one language might have an equivalent in a different one, but it doesn't translate exactly. And so being able to navigate through the different languages enables you to communicate different ways at different times. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And it's certainly been my experience. I'm grateful to you for sharing it with me.
Oh, you're welcome.
So if languages have been a really important part of your life and your journey, are there other sections of your life or categories that have also been really important?
Well, right now, professionally or even spiritually, one of the most important things is my artwork, which you can see behind me, my beautiful guardian angels. That's been a journey since 1985. I was told when I was 11 that I had no talent, and I believed them for 26 years and rediscovered artwork when I was, I think, 35. And I've been at it ever since. And it's a great, wonderful journey.
And how has that journey and your expression of your artwork evolved over time?
Well, I've always wanted to do realistic portraits, but with a spiritual connection with us. It's not just the face or the body or the rendition of that particular human being. It's always for me a connection. And that goes to the other part of my life, which is probably the central piece. It's my spiritual journey, which has gone through many transformations and many teachings and ups and downs. So my artwork is intimately connected with that because I feel that what I'm expressing is something that's coming through me about the greater universe, about the beauty of the universe. And I know you wanted to talk about values. And, for me, beauty is so primordial. It's so important, my experience of beauty. And art allows me to reproduce it and share it with others.
And I would imagine experience it too, because I'm not an artist, but I'm guessing if you're creating something that is a representation of something that's so important to you, you live in that for a while.
You should see my living room. I think I have about 25 paintings. They're all over. Wow. And it's like a little temple where you have all these beautiful goddesses surrounding us, me and my partner. And I'll just be there and feel literally the paintings giving back to me.
Yeah, so it's so much to do with the energy. Out of interest, when you're creating a piece of art, which part of the process is your favorite? Do you get the most satisfaction from it being finished or a different part of the process?
Well, it can be a struggle. It can be completely annoying. It can be despair, or it can be an absolute flow and it happens all by itself. So really it's the process, the right hemisphere part where you're in time, you're out of time, and you're following the intuition, you're following your own inner guidance.
So, Jean-Paul, you've mentioned the beginning of your journey to language and the beginning of your journey to art. And you've also mentioned that spirituality has been a really important part of your life. What was your beginning of your spirituality journey?
When I was born. When people ask me in the past, what do? You go to a party and people say, what do you do? I'm an attorney. I would always answer, I'm a heavy breather. Because so of course the spiritual journey starts when you're born, and it's a discovery whether you know it or not. So when I was about 19 or 20, I discovered yoga and meditation, became vegetarian, started doing massive quantities of yoga and changing my entire way of being. And within a few years, I was a completely different person. And that has stayed with me all these years, since 1969 is when this happened. So that was a great transformation where I learned the tools of spirituality. The tools are not spirituality, but they are what you use to as a touchstone, develop yourself, change this, change that, experiment with that. And that's one thing that I wanted to say. I know you wanted to discuss tools for mindset. There is no one tool. There is no one way. There is no one diet. There is nothing which is set. It's always given to the individual to explore and to feel, to experiment, to make mistakes with, and then make it their own. Yeah, and once you've made it your own, then you can evolve it. That was a long-winded answer. I don't think you even asked the question.
It was a perfect answer, and it set me up perfectly for what I really want to dive into with you, which is the idea of mindset and spirituality and how we can invest in those things to shape our own reality. And I'll share that. I mean, you know this, but to share with the people listening, we've been working together now, oh my gosh, 6-7 years maybe. And something like that. And I have learned just as much from you, if not more, about mindset and spirituality as I have Spanish. And the two things combined have really, it sounds dramatic, but they have really shifted my life and changed who I am. And I would not have, I went in to learn Spanish and my goal was fluency. And after a couple of years, I let go of that fluency goal because I realized it's not helpful. It's poorly defined. It's not really a thing. And in fact, my goal has shifted just toward ongoing exploration and evolution of the language, evolution of understanding of myself, evolution of spirituality. And so in our work together, I've just learned so much more. And my impression of you is that how your ethos is so baked in to who you are as a person and how you approach life that I've learned a lot about that. And so I was just excited to talk to you and dig in and share your approach or your learnings from your approach with other people. Would you say it was around the same time that you discovered yoga that you started to see the connection between mindset and the life you were living, or did that come at a different time?
I think it came at the same time, yeah.
Yeah.
That you could affect your destiny by your thoughts, by your actions. Yeah.
The tools that you have used, I mean, you already shared with us that there's no one tool, it changes and it evolves. How have those evolved for you over time?
More freedom one weakness that I had was I would find a teacher, I would find a system, and it became truth, it became reality. Even against my own intuition, even against my own better judgment or self-interest, because it was the truth. I mean, I was kind of, I could become a true believer in certain situations, particularly with systems and spiritual systems. So what's evolved for me is maturity, we'd call it, realizing that, yes, a system is fantastic, a teacher is wonderful, but you have to place it within your own psyche, within your own life, within your own belief structures, and adjust it and make it yours. Mm. And I'm very happy that I've been able to learn how to do that. So that an incredible new teaching or teacher now is an opportunity rather than a prison.
That's a really big change in how you think about something.
Yes.
Yeah. And how do you invest how do you invest in a positive mindset for you?
Well, basically that's all I do. All day, every day, and at night as well, because I love to work with dreams and non-physical consciousness. So 24 hours a day, I'm invested in mindset. So the elements, one of them, of course, is physical. And that was another mistake. Even though I did a lot of yoga, I never understood my own body. I never felt my own body. I was never able to make my own body my own. Again, it was a tool, and I was using it according to someone else's system. So that's a great, great gift to understand that your body is yours, and it's a partnership that you have with this incredible physical being that's alive with billions of cells. And that's one of the tools that I use constantly. So through exercise, walking, nature, different kinds of exercises, maybe Qigong, maybe yoga. It doesn't matter what it is. You just have to explore it and make it yours. And then it will serve you. And when it no longer serves you or it bores you, then you look for another one. So the body is extremely important. So much of what is your mindset really comes from your physical state. So one of the things I've been doing for maybe 7-8 years, I've worked with Wim Hof and the Dutch incredible person who teaches us about the cold and about breath. And that's been very transformative. Take an ice bath in the middle of the winter, and you realize that most of what you worry about is not real. So that's a fantastic tool. Breath, I fell in love with 50, 60 years ago, and I've continued to do breathing exercises. They allow you to monitor and change and increase and develop your own mindset, if you will. So breath is incredibly important. Attention to the physical body is incredibly important.
One question I have on my own journey of figuring out mindset and the tools that work for me is that there tend to be trendy tools that a lot of people suggest and you hear kind of over and over. And some people will present that tool that works for them as a truth, that you must do this.
Right.
And so there's, there might be a tool that does or doesn't work for you. And one of the things that I've struggled with is almost like, I think it's probably performance guilt around a particular tool. Like there might be a tool that I try and it just doesn't seem to work for me, but it's represented out there in the world as a T truth. This is going to work for you. And so what advice would you have for me or for anyone else that has an experience of then it stops being about the mindset and it starts being about failure to dominate this tool,
Right. Well, you could use it that way. You could say, I'm going to learn this tool. and I'm going to master it. Then it's a self-challenge, and you'll get something out of that. Or you can say, I'm trying to hammer this nail in, and the screwdriver is just not doing
it. and just let it go.
And let it go.
Let it go and move on to something else.
So there's very often a surface level to any teaching, to any tool, to any practice, to any science. And if you're just following that surface, sort of influencer yoga kind of thing, you're not going to get as much as if you go deeply within your own body, in the case of yoga, and feel it, and feel the resonance of it. Because somewhere, some guy or some gal came up with it and said, this is great. This feels good. I'm going to teach all my friends about this. But then, often you'll have the normative stage that comes in, and then people turn it into truth, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why there's a Zen saying, which is, if you find the Buddha on the road, kill him. Because he's an obstacle to your self-development. Even the Buddha, even the most enlightened being, is going to ultimately be something outside of you, and it's going to be an obstacle. So that's the answer to that particular riddle. If you find the Buddha on the road, what should you do?
Kill him.
Kill him.
So tell me more about that. So I want to wrap my head around that. So the idea is that I don't know if freedom is the right word, but the freedom comes from within yourself.
Right.
And so connection to things, tools, beings outside of yourself are a barrier to that. Do I have that right?
Well, they're not so much a barrier, but they're not the focus of it. They're not the center of it. Consciousness is experienced as perception, through your perceptions. You're the center of the universe right now as you watch me and I watch you. And from those perceptions, there's an internal experience which we call consciousness, and it's totally internal.
It exists within my mind or within your mind.
Right. And so you must make it yours. It's, that's a better way to phrase it. Make it yours. Whatever the teaching is, whatever the idea is, to see if it works for you, to see if it works for you all the time, to see if it's worth pursuing. And to see how it makes you feel through time. If it makes you feel you're practicing something and you feel wonderful and you feel but you're hurting people around you, or you're feeling tight, then maybe there's something to be adjusted there. So self-adjustment.
So you said two really important things there, I think. Make it yours. Figure out what works for you. Make it yours. And then does it work for you? Does it serve you? And I think those are two really important questions. And that's, I think what you're saying is the difference between all these various tools. And if they work for other people, great. But does it work for you?
Right.
And make it yours to make it work for you, or leave it at the side of the road. Either one is fine. Yeah.
There's another piece which is really important for me about mindset, which is, yes, I live in a physical universe. Yes, there are other human beings. Yes, I can hit myself on the head. There is definitely a physical reality that exists. And now we're getting in the realm of beliefs. In my beliefs, there is more than just this physical body. There are experiences outside of this physical body, connected to consciousness, connected to intuition, connected to emotion, connected to I don't even know what. And that is very, very interesting to me. Because instead of being, I'm this physical body and I exist here and I must make a lot of money, instead of having that approach, there's more of an exploration approach, that there are things going on that I can't even be aware of, but I want to feel them. So for mindset, for me, that's another piece, is to sense, to feel, not just to think. Because the mind will be like a fish in an aquarium, hitting the aquarium's edges all the time. And so sometimes you have to let your right cerebral hemisphere, which is in present moment, expand. And you have to be comfortable with not knowing what you're doing, not knowing where you're going. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's a central part. And it seems that, and this is very subjective, but it seems to me that when I live that way, somehow the universe seems to give me feedback, seems to give me energy, seems to give me intuition, seems to give me thoughts or visions or desires or satisfaction. And so again, it becomes a play between my subjectivity and then the universe around me. And that's where I find most of my joy, and my art is connected into that.
Yeah. Is there an example you can share of when that's happened, when you've lived that way and you've received from the universe?
Just in a very simple way. Satisfaction, joy, bliss. I'm walking through the day, and sometimes I might be in my head, oh my God, I got to do this. I'm not producing enough artwork. My artwork is not, my drawing isn't right. Oh my God, I'm not meditating well enough. And I'm hitting the sides of the aquarium, and I let it go. Maybe I'll go on the land and walk around and look at the trees, and then just very simply start to feel something else, which is not necessarily me.
So getting outside of your head is an important part of mindset.
Right. Not being trapped in your own thoughts.
Right.
Not believing that what you believe is reality.
I think that's a really important point because, the word mindset, it makes you think about the mind, right? So
right.
Having a mindset, it's a being set.
Right.
It's a much more universal way of thinking. And I think one of the things that I have definitely learned from you is how can you approach things that you cannot control? And so much of life is things that are beyond of our control. And so I would say that the being set is really important for approaching things like that. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think that everything is, at some level, is within our control by expanding our consciousness. The more we embrace, the more we're part of what is around us. It sounds a little heady.
Right. So the more, I think that's my experience. Like the more you invest in an approach that is focused on getting outside of your mind, outside of the things that you control, the more you're connected to to other things that you can't control that don't matter. You're connected to your being and your sense of self. And
there's a greater universe which we can connect with in many different ways, and it varies for every person. There's not just one entrance point into consciousness, happiness, the universe. That's kind of the glory of it, like different sunsets, never the same twice.
Right. And I think when I first started exploring the idea of spirituality and mindset and sense of being, I thought that it was about for me at the beginning actually was about control. It was like, if I don't control my brain will control me. And so it was really about control. And as I have gone on my own spiritual journey, I have learned really what you're explaining, which is that it's not about control. It's about connection. And it isn't connection in it's not like spiritual connection. It actually threads through, it threads through everything. It goes, I shouldn't do hand signals for those that are listening. It's not vertical, it's horizontal. It runs through everything. So it sounds like, from what you're explaining, your spirituality is intimately connected with your being a linguist and being an artist. It's all interwoven. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So for somebody who's starting out on their own spiritual journey, what advice would you give them?
spiritual development, spiritual journey. First of all, realize that you're already there. You already are the center of your own universe, and that you have all the tools and all the capacities and all the knowledge in place to be absolutely successful and fulfilled. That there's not something that you must learn or you will fail. And then it's a matter of exploring, and like we were saying earlier, seeing what fits with you, what works with you. Some people love Pilates, some people don't. Some people love yoga, some people hate it. So you have to kind of see what's out there as teachers, as teachings, with media, with all the tools. Be open-minded to try many, many things. The key pieces would be, of course, some of the tools that we've been given for many years, understanding the body and working with the body. So experiment with physical systems, whether it's Wim Hof or yoga or Qigong or Tai Chi, doesn't matter. You'll find what you like. Meditation is wonderful, mindfulness or Zen or Indian meditation or Western meditation, doesn't matter. Again, you're exploring, seeing what's out there, how it works for you. And as you like to remind us, be kind, being compassionate, being loving, and realizing that there is no ultimate destination you have to reach. In our modern Western society, we're very goal-oriented. Can you get it done? Get it done, But ultimately, you're not getting anything done. And be happy is the only thing that's worth doing. Doesn't matter what tool you use to be happy.
I mean, I think the take the destination away is such powerful advice. It has that in itself has transformed my life. It's transformed my Spanish for sure. And then I think that for me, that's probably my next step, is to think about removing any kind of deadline or finish line in my own spiritual journey.
You?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still very destination driven. That there's some sense of getting to a better plane rather than developing a practice.
There's something else I was thinking about, which is that a big piece of who I am and how I operate in the world is, it used to be just a hope and a belief, but it's becoming stronger and stronger that the universe is benevolent. And that even though there is crazy stuff and chaotic stuff going on, and there are wars and there's suffering based on coming out of ignorance. But I do believe that if we sense the universe as being benevolent, sentient and benevolent, so in this search for, or this exploration of spirituality and wanting to develop spirituality, realizing that there are many beautiful, giving, loving people who want to help us. And many beautiful teachings that will allow us to save years, because you don't have to figure it out. And the second part is you have to test it for yourself, to go back to what we were saying. But there are wonderful beings, I think, in the body and out of the body, that are with us, that guide us, that love us, and that want to help us. And to avail ourselves of that is wonderful. And at some point being able to turn it around and being the same for someone else.
Yeah, I love that, because, and it definitely coincides with some of my own belief systems, which is that you see what you're looking for. So if you're looking for chaos and negativity and destruction, it's there for you. And if you're looking for benevolence and kindness and compassion, that is also there. You can see, and the one you pay attention to tends to grow in our mind and in our worlds. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that chaos and negativity and fear are sort of chaotic reactions within our physical universe, but they're not at the essence of it. They're not at the foundation of it. They're not key elements. I don't believe that there's a devil fighting against a God and that we're caught in this duality. And so for me, that's a dominant piece. Even though I may personally be afraid in the moment for physical reasons or emotional reasons, if I can calm myself down and expand my mind and my consciousness and my feelings enough, I'll realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
The universe is okay, and it is going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that leads me really nicely into my next question, Jean-Paul. So you and I have talked a lot in our time together about core values. And this, of course, is something that I care about a lot and something that I've done a lot of talking about and working about. And so what is your understanding of how core values or how your core values interplay with your spirituality and your art and the other things that are important to you in your life?
Well, I think of myself not as having the core values. I think of myself as being my core values. So I want to stand for beauty. I want to stand for courage. I want to represent it. I want to experience it. So in my case, beauty, bliss, courage are fundamental themes.
Yeah.
And I can't even think of being outside of them. And if my life no longer embodies these elements, these values, I'm very unhappy. I'm very dissatisfied. I'm very frustrated. As a matter of fact, I'm like a homing machine looking for beauty and bliss and courage everywhere all the time.
I love that. I love that phrasing of it, that they're not something you have, they're something that you are.
Right. Right, yeah. Because otherwise it's surface.
Yeah. Right. And it's not connected to who you are intrinsically, which I really do believe that core values are. They are intrinsically connected to who you are.
Right.
And uniquely yours. Your set of core values, defined the way you define them, are uniquely yours. Well, Jean-Paul, I am so grateful to you for your time and your energy and sharing your incredible wisdom with us.
We're done already.
It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But you're a good host.
Well, I'm so grateful to you for this conversation and everything you've taught me. And I'm so lucky to have been able, for the universe that clashed us together when we did.
Bam!
Exactly. Thank you so much, Jean-Paul.
Well, it's been my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Wasn't that incredible? I hope that you got something amazing out of that you can carry forward. I know that I did. Jean-Paul and I spend an hour and a half together a week doing our Spanish lessons, and we have for years now. So we have talked about all of these things in English and Spanish and at length. And I learned incredible things today too. I love the concept that he shared of a being set versus a mindset. And also the idea that your core values are who you are. They're not something that you have. And many other things that he shared in terms of what spirituality is, how we can access it, and what a journey of spirituality looks like. So I hope that you took something away from this that will help you on your own change-making journey. And I really look forward to seeing you back here next time. Adios.